Hi, for those of you new here, this is evolution simulation game The Sapling, my solo indie game project. It's a game where you can basically do two types of things. On the one hand, there are a number of scenarios tasking you to design an ecosystem that meets specific requirements. On the other, there's a sandbox where you can build your own plants and animals, turn on random mutations and see how they evolve. In this series, consisting of 6 videos, I showcase the development and content for the third big update for the game. I already told you last video that I never intended to add any underwater content to the game, but that I changed my mind after the 10,000th time a player suggested it to me. But why do players keep suggesting it to me? I spent quite some time thinking about this and I have 4 possible hypotheses. Hypothesis 1. Players saw flight in the previous update, realized that I don't limit myself to land animals, and mentioned a third possible type of location where animals can live. Water. Hypothesis 2. As we all know, life started underwater, so maybe players want to stay closer to reality and start their life underwater too. Hypothesis 3. These are spore fans that are still bitter about the aquatic stage that was once demoed but did not make it into the final game. Or hypothesis 4. Aquatic mammals are cool. And to focus on that last one for a bit, I knew that dolphins are not fish but evolved from land animals back into the water, but I never realized that mammals evolved to fill the underwater carnivore niche on 3 separate occasions. It happened in the clade of cats and dogs, leading to seals and walruses. It happened in the clade of aardvarks and elephants, leading to sea cows. And it happened in the clade of hoofed animals, leading to dolphins and whales. How cool is that? And thinking about that, I realized that the game could have air-breathing aquatic animals that do when they come up to breathe, and at that point, I had to convince myself. Still, it's quite a task, so I approached it the way I approach all larger tasks. Break them up into smaller pieces. For aquatic animals, after a lot of banging my head against the wall, I realized it came down to introducing 2 new systems, breathing and swimming. Breathing, to start, took quite a few design iterations to get right. The problem is that whenever I think of breathing, I think of things like oxygen, CO2 and lungs. The real system in nature is not only complex, but also mostly invisible, and as I've explained before, simulation mechanics that use invisible things consistently frustrate players during playtests. The most important distinction is that some animals will need air, and others will need water to breathe. In the end, the solution that felt best to me was to link this distinction to mouths. This is not true to life in some ways. As you know, fish also use gills and insects don't use their mouths at all for oxygen, but it does match how the target audience breathes, and has the advantage that it is easy to understand and really visible. It works as follows. Each mouth has one main oxygen source. For all existing mouths this is air, and I added a number of new ones for water. The most primitive mouth is now this one, where a jaw has not evolved yet, which is a bit closer to reality than the weird primitive thing I had before. Besides a main oxygen source, for each mouth there is a statistic saying how long it can stay in the other type of environment. For example, some mouths may be water mouths, but they will be able to stay on land for some time without suffocating. This way, if the land has something to offer, aquatic animals may gradually evolve to stay on land for longer periods of time. And just like in real life, it doesn't work the other way around. Animals that fully depend on air cannot evolve water-breathing mouths anymore, but they can evolve air-breathing mouths that can stay underwater relatively long. And this is where the blowhole comes in. Animals with blowholes can stay underwater for so long that they can practically compete with water breathers, and on the rare occasion that they do need to come up, I make the game play this sound and show this particle system for each blowhole that they have. My first attempt for the particle system was more like a fountain, but studying video material of real blowholes made me realize it's way more like the water droplets you see in the air when you breathe on a cold day. Starting with Unity's basic particle system, I changed the shape of the system so the particles go up in a small column. Step 2 is making sure it is a one-time thing, but there are a lot more particles, and some spawn a little later than the others. Step 3 is making sure the particles die again, but before that they first slow down and become more translucent. And step 4 is changing the actual particle to this thing, which has a more steamy, smoky quality. I also use it for the clouds. With the introduction of breathing as a major new system in the game, it is now possible for animals to live in the water permanently. This means they will also need to lay their eggs there. So far, all eggs look like this, which obviously is not what aquatic eggs typically look like. To make laying eggs in water a bit more realistic, I've added a concept of egg types. The one egg model we previously had is now the land egg, and I've added this aquatic egg and this intermediate stage. The second major new system is swimming. The first step to make swimming a reality was adding the underwater and water surface locations to the game. This was surprisingly easy because for the previous update I already introduced the concept of location types. I used to have underground, in a tree and in the air, and now I added just 2 more, water surface and underwater. So that part was done surprisingly quick. What I underestimated though were all these land related details I forgot about but suddenly had to worry about again. The clearest example of this is the dust particle effect and sound when dropping a creature on land. When dropping a creature in water, it should of course be a splash effect and sound. Then, for the actual swimming, I had the exact same problem I had with breathing, where it quickly became clear that a real life system was too complex and I needed to figure out what parts of it to simplify to make it fun. You see, most fish use their tail fins for moving forward, their back fin for stability and their side fins for turning. For a long time I was thinking I either had to include underwater stability and turning as 2 new animal statistics, which I didn't like because the simulation already has so many animal statistics, or I could not include back fins and side fins, which I didn't like because then fish don't look like fish. In the end, I went with the third option, which is that all 3 fin types contribute to the one movement statistic the game already had: speed. Similar to how I like the simplification of using mouse to determine the oxygen source, I like this approach because it prevents new players from being overwhelmed, while still being close enough to real life to create interesting phenomena. To make this all possible, I replaced the primitive limbs I had before with various fin body parts. There is a ray fins branch, inspired by almost all modern fish, a lobe fin branch, which can evolve into land legs, and there are 4 aquatic limbs that can evolve from land limbs. These webbed bird feet evolve from bird type feet and makes animals swim more efficiently. These webbed feet evolve from simple feet and also make animals swim more efficiently. These paddle-shaped fins evolve from webbed feet and are even faster, but can no longer walk. And these evolve from feathered wings, inspired by penguins. Unlike land legs, which only work on the side of an animal, fins will turn into a back fin if you put them on the back, and into a tail fin if you put them on the tail. This meant I had to add support for shape-shifting body parts in the animal builder code, and I had to design 3 models instead of 1 for every fin, so you can imagine this was quite a lot of work. With so many body parts increasing speed, there should also be things that decrease speed, otherwise everything will just swim crazy fast. This statistic I call drag, and I have to admit I was not looking forward to designing the icon for such an abstract concept, because I was afraid to spend 2 weeks on it and still not be satisfied. But I was actually already happy with my 3rd attempt, which you see here. An animal's drag is determined by how aerodynamic a body shape is, with this being an example of a body shape that won't be able to swim fast in water, but the main sources of drag will basically be all non-aquatic body parts, meaning that an average land animal will be a very slow swimmer. There might however be land carnivore species that discover an open aquatic carnivore niche. To make it possible for these carnivores to become semi or even fully aquatic again, I added 2 new air-breathing mounts that have less drag and thus are more efficient for underwater use. To the main carnivorous mouth branch, I've added this new aquatic air-breathing mouth. It's inspired by a mouth type that actually evolved several times on Earth, like in the aquatic reptiles ichthyosaurs and aquatic mammals dolphins. The aquatic alternative to the carnivorous beak looks like this. It has the same pointy end as the normal carnivorous beak, but it is much longer, like the beaks that evolved in many seabirds, like gulls and albatrosses, cormorants, razorbills and some booby and penguin species. The final major problem I had to tackle for this update is underwater movement. Just like there are different ways of movement on the ground, there are also different ways of movement underwater. To start with the simplest one, if you give your creature land legs, it will swim like dogs and other tetrapods in water. I say simple because I could simply make this animation by studying YouTube videos of swimming dogs frame by frame and then just play this animation whenever the animal swims. The second swimming type is very rare and is only used when you have the penguin wings. Again, I made it by studying swimming animal videos, in this case penguins. What took me really long was the third and probably most common swimming method: generating thrust by moving the tail sideways, or up and down for the fins that evolve from land legs. The first step here was to actually implement the concept of a tail in the game. So far, the player could make something that looks like a tail, but the game was not actually aware of this. The newly added tail recognizer considers everything after the last legs or fins a tail. My first attempt at making the tail move was by creating the animation manually, like I did with the other swimming animations. But whatever I tried, it always looked messy. Finally, I admitted defeat and wrote a Blender Python script to automatically calculate snake-like movement, using a basic sine wave function. I had to brush up some more trigonometry to get this to fully work. It's a bit embarrassing because this is really basic mathematics. But this is the function that outputs the angle for each bone for each frame. To make it look like a real swimming animal, I make the effect really weak for the first bone and stronger the longer the tail is. The advantage of this approach is that I can even have eel-like fish with no fins at all, and this animation still looks okay. Just like with the atmosphere shader in the first episodes of this series, I've added a number of parameters so I could experiment a bit and get it to look exactly like I wanted. And just like with the atmosphere, there are all kinds of cool but useless other things you can do with it. Now that we have swimming animals, they of course also need to be introduced to the player somehow. Just like with the algae in the first scenario, I do that by redesigning an existing scenario, in this case the scenario called the first creature. Unlike the first scenario, however, I'm not sad about this one because I never really liked the original design. This is the new design, with a lot more space for the ocean, where the player's first creature will live. And with that, you guys finally have animals that can breathe and swim underwater, lots of water-related body parts, and a part in the scenario dedicated to learn how they work. In other words, you finally have your aquatic life. Okay, so what will happen next? You will be able to create your own aquatic life on Steam's beta branch on August 16, and a full release will follow a month later on September 13. By the way, a heads up, most players indicate the current price is a bit on the cheap side, so September 13 will also see a small price increase. So if you already know you want to buy the game, you might want to do it before that time. After the release in September, I will of course continue to upload patches with bug fixes and optimizations, but apart from that I will slow down a little to recharge for the next big update. Before I start work on that, I plan to create more content similar to the 7-day livestream videos. Unlike these videos, however, I plan to cover a longer period of time and break it up into multiple videos. And that's it. All that's left for me to say is thanks. Thanks for watching this video series all the way up to this point. Thanks for the overwhelming amount of enthusiastic comments every time I upload something. Thanks for helping me catch bugs that I could never catch on my own. It's been super inspiring to read that all around the globe there are so many people that are just as excited about this project as I am. So thanks. It means the world to me.